I'd like to call this meeting of Zion City Council to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Here.
Commissioner Deteen?
Here.
Commissioner McDowell?
Here.
Commissioner McKinney?
Here.
Mayor Hill?
Here. Pastor Langley.
Thank you, Mayor. The Bible says that if we lack wisdom, we should ask God, who loves to give generously and does not shame us for needing to ask. That promise is for people who trust Him and seek to honor Him, and I think that there are many of us here who do. That promise is made primarily to people who are being persecuted, but I think it's legitimate to broaden it to people who find themselves in troubled times. And that may be true for us as well. So let's take Him up on His offer and ask. Let's bow and pray. God, we thank You that You have chosen to make Yourself known in Your Word as a generous God, an all-wise God who is happy to guide and lead those who trust in You. And we want to pause right here at the beginning of this evening's meeting to do just that. Would You grant wisdom and every other virtue that's needed for our elected officials and those who serve with them to lead well, that our community would flourish and that You would be pleased and honored. And to that end, we ask for Your help in Your Son's name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm going to just do a little spiel here one more time. A couple meetings ago, Mr. Bremner reminded us of the words of the Pledge of Allegiance, and he asked us to slow down when we're saying it because we often rush through it. So would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and let's slow it down when we're saying it, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 4 on the agenda is agenda changes. Do the commissioners have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Is there discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item number 5 on the agenda is a special presentation about home rule. And I would like to introduce, we have an expert here. She is with our law firm, the City Council, City Legal Counsel of Ansel, Glink, DeCiani, and Krafteffer.
Very good.
And so she is our legal expert, and she's going to give a presentation on what home rule is and what it is not, and what we as council members and city staff members may do and may not do. And then we're going to open, when she's done with her presentation, we're going to open it up for questions from the commissioners. And then when we're done, we will open up for questions from anyone in the audience that has any questions. Now, I just want to be sure that everybody understands the ground rules on what we're doing here during this presentation. It's to answer your questions on what home rule means. It's not to get into a debate at this time. It's not to have opinions at this time, whether you're for it or against it. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments, and you will have an opportunity to speak whether you're for or against it or debate it or whatever you want to do at that point. So I just want to be sure that everybody understands that this is to provide information only on what home rule is for her presentation. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me out here tonight. It's nice to see such a large group come out here for this. So one of the things that our law firm does is we educate public officials and public bodies and just members of the public generally on different legal issues related to units of local government. We represent around 300 units of local government in the state and about 50 municipalities. And right now, this issue of home rule, even as you know from just being out in this area generally, is kind of a hot topic, which is interesting because it's kind of cyclical. Sometimes we hear about people turning home rule, and then we hear about people abusing home rule powers, and so I want to kind of give you an overview of what it is and what it's not, and if you want to go forward and maybe try to get it, what you can do. But I'm going to start tonight with this is going to be a law school class, okay? You probably didn't sign up for this part, but in order to understand the powers that a government can exercise, I just want to talk a little bit about the framework for that. So we're going to start with a principle called Dillon's rule. And Dillon's rule was first expressed in 1868 by an Iowa Supreme Court justice, and he said basically, and these aren't his exact words, but he said, hey, if a government is going to exercise a power, that power has to come from somewhere. So there's now a rule that has originated called Dillon's rule, and it really just stands for that proposition, that if you want to exercise a governmental power, in our instance, in Illinois, for example, the Illinois General Assembly will have had to have given us a law that allows a public body to exercise that power. So when our 1970 Constitution was drafted, there was a section in it that was added that says that units of local government shall only have powers granted by law. So that kind of embraced Dillon's rule there. But there was a special thing, a special power that was crafted into that Constitution, which was contained in Article 7, Section 6 of the Constitution. And what it said is we're going to have some special units of government which are called home rule governments. And that's available to any municipality that has over 25,000 in population. Or if your municipality elects by referendum to become home rule, you can have an election and let the voters vote for that. And so really those are the two ways that you can become home rule. But what is home rule? So if you are a non-home rule unit of local government, you can only exercise those powers where you can point to a law or a statute that allows you to do that. If you are home rule, it's the opposite of that. You can exercise a power unless the General Assembly has preempted home rule, which means there's a law saying that you can't regulate it, for example. So, except as limited, if you are a home rule body, you can exercise any power or function related to government, which sometimes include the power to regulate different things related to public health, safety, morals, welfare, and to license, to tax, and to incur debt. Now, there are limits to home rule, though, because otherwise any municipality could just adopt whatever kind of law they wanted, and that would really result in chaos throughout the state if people had different traffic vehicle licensing laws than the state had and things like that. So we have different limits on home rule power. So home rule units can't do certain things. They can't incur certain types of debt. They can't define and provide for punishments of felonies. And they only have the abilities given by the General Assembly to punish and imprison for up to 6 months for certain crimes, and to license for revenue or impose taxes upon or measured by income or by certain occupations. So let's just stop for a minute and talk about that, because really I don't want to get too far in the weeds when it comes to all these hyper-technical legalities, because really, usually what people are interested about when we talk about home rule, and why people come to meetings like this, is because municipalities want to have the ability to provide property tax relief to their constituents, and that's a really tough thing in Illinois right now, especially when we have governments who are called upon to provide increasing level of services, and we also have the state trying to take away some of the funds that have traditionally come into the municipalities, like local government distributive fund, and we also have a lot of unfunded mandates that the state requires cities to provide. So they'll say, you have to do this and you have to do that, and we're not going to give you the ability to either raise taxes or provide additional services. So sometimes why municipalities want to become home rule is to explore other options to get revenue into the city aside from property taxes. And I know in Zion particularly, there's a clamor for property tax relief that the city is taking pretty seriously. So that's one of the reasons that the city just wants to see if this is a power that's available to them. And I want to just kind of read through a list here of different powers that a home rule municipality can exercise related to taxation so that everybody can kind of understand why it might be appealing. Because it's a way to bring revenue into the city. Sometimes it's not just on the heels of the residents. It might be if people are coming in town to use services here or have businesses here, things like that. So municipalities can impose tax. They can't impose an income tax, so it's not going to be that, and they can't impose an occupation tax. But they can impose sales taxes and use taxes, inheritance taxes, motor vehicle taxes, tobacco product taxes, hotel motel taxes, per capita head taxes, which are usually imposed on different businesses in town, leasing taxes, admission taxes, wheel taxes, gasoline taxes and use taxes, amusement taxes, alcoholic beverage taxes, real estate transfer taxes, and exemptions of certain property within special service areas from taxes that they might otherwise have to pay. So they can actually impose tax relief in certain instances, and they can also in certain instances have special assessments in order to make local improvements. Now, for those of you who are trying to take notes, I will make this information in my PowerPoint, which I'm reading from, available so the city can put that on their website or otherwise distribute it, and that'll be available after tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about taking close notes about this.
Just so everybody knows, this will probably be on the city's website, the entire council meeting tomorrow. And I've asked Gibby if he would pull this section out that we can get posted on the local Zion Community Forum and iHeart Zion, so that there'll be opportunities to, if you're taking notes, there'll be opportunities to see this as many times as you want. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. And then in addition to powers that home rule municipalities can exercise related to taxes, they also have powers with respect to elections. If they want to, for example, have nonpartisan elections, if they want to hold a referendum for runoff elections. These aren't things that the municipality would do without the voice of the people, though. So these aren't just things, these would also require additional referendum. And they can also change their rules of order to vote in a particular manner. They also have some abilities related to personnel. They can extend probationary periods for employees or limit tenure rights. They have the ability to change the clerk from an elective office to an appointive office by ordinance. They can change the number of trustees and the terms of office by ordinance. They have the ability to combine police and fire departments or to require police officers to participate in a police pension fund. And then they also have certain powers that can be executed with respect to building and zoning. They can regulate subdivision drainage, parking requirements, enact and enforce building codes. And some of these, I mean, they're already doing through laws that are permitted by the state, but it just gives them greater flexibility in doing that. They also have unlimited power to incur debt payable from other sources other than property taxes. And that, I mean, so that's kind of a broad-based summary of the different powers that can be exercised by a municipality that is home rule. Now, so let's see here. So basically, with respect to governmental structure, if there are changes that they want to make, subject to approval by referendum to change the structure of the government and to provide for officers, manners in terms of selection, things like that. And then there's a lot of limitations. And I don't think I'm going to spend a lot of time going through the limitations, because the limitations already exist by law. So what that means is that if there's something that the city wants to do where the state has preempted it, they're not going to be able to exercise that power. Now, one of the things that the Constitution permits is that we have a broad construction of home rule powers, so that the state is trying to enable home rule municipalities to do what it is that they want to do. And in fact, the Illinois Municipal League has a committee of home rule attorneys, so they meet on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, to try to determine what is it that governments need to be able to do where they're being crippled by the state from doing it. So that is something that there's an ongoing dialogue about, and you can exist outside of the framework of non-home rule municipalities. So now, what if the city decides that they want to become home rule? What is the process for that? Well, the first thing that they need to do is they would pass a resolution to place a question on the ballot. Now, the last day to put a resolution on the ballot for the November election was yesterday. So this is off the table for the November election. So if this is going to happen, if the city wants to consider this.
We already did that.
Oh, you already did it?
Yes, we already did. We did a resolution.
Oh, you did
last
it?
meeting.
Oh, okay, all right, so it's on there for that. I'm sorry, I thought it was still before that. Okay, all right, so that's on the ballot, all right. So what rules apply then about campaigning? Well, the same rules apply about campaigning for a home rule referendum as apply for other referenda, which is that the Illinois Constitution has a bar that you cannot use public funds for private purposes. So the city cannot campaign for or against home rule officially as a city council. And that also is buffered by a prohibition in the Illinois Election Code that you can't use public funds to urge any voter to vote for or against a candidate or a proposition. And we also have other laws that regulate ethics in Illinois. And one of those laws is the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act. And that basically says that no governmental employee shall intentionally perform any prohibited political activity while they're on compensated time. So the city can't use city officials or city employees to go out during the workday and campaign for home rule or against home rule, and that's the same law that applies to any kind of candidate or referendum, not specifically just home rule. The only thing is that if a city employee wants to use their compensated time off, like if they have a vacation day that they're getting paid for, and they want to use that day to go out and campaign, they would be able to do that, just as anyone would be able to do on their paid vacation time. Now, prohibited political activity includes just about anything you could think of relating to campaigning. So it would be anything related to campaigning or soliciting funds for or against a referendum. And there is a specific list in the Ethics Act of things that you can't do. They can't attend political meetings on paid time. Now, one question that we often get about this is, well, what does that mean when you apply that to elected officials who receive nominal compensation for the roles that they're performing? Can they speak for or against it if they don't really have set hours? Yes, they can. Just because someone's an elected official doesn't mean that they lose their First Amendment right to have an opinion on something. So they can campaign whenever they want. They can go out and they can talk to people and say, support this or vote against this or whatever they want to do. And that's not an issue because that's not really covered by this same law that would cover what an employee is doing on compensated time. So back to what the employees cannot do. They can't solicit contributions while they're on paid work time. They can do all of this off duty if they really feel passionate about an issue, of course. They can't conduct public opinion polls. They can't survey voters. They can't assist in the polls on election day if that's a work day for them. If it's a day that they're taking off, they can serve as an election judge or work in the polls. They can't solicit votes, circulate petitions on compensated work time, distribute campaign literature, anything like that. So compensated time is any time that counts towards minimum work time, which doesn't include holidays or leave time, and as I discussed, it also does not include paid sick or vacation time. However, there is something that the city can do, and that is they can distribute information about what home rule means and what it does not mean. So I'm here today. I'm a part of an information campaign. I'm not telling you to vote for it or against it. I'm just educating you. And the city can likewise put out publications and materials informing voters, this is what home rule means, this is what it doesn't mean. And they can also specify this could be a potential consequence if we don't get it, as long as it's factual. It can't be like lobbying or advancing a political agenda. And there's a specific section of the election code which actually says that the part that limits the expenditure of public funds doesn't apply to the use of public funds for dissemination of factual information. Now, off-duty, officials and employees can do or say whatever they want to about a referendum or a candidate. And officials can advocate for or against a referendum as long as they are not on municipal property, holding themselves out as officers or employees on compensated time. Now, there's a whole body of law related to what can be done on public property related to campaigning. And basically, the city has the ability to establish a designated public forum where people can say or do whatever they want to do. Like if they want to have people passing out literature, whether it's the Chinese food restaurant menu or campaign, they can do that as long as it's outside of, well, they can designate on public property where that will be. And on election day, we have other special rules that apply if this is a polling place. And if there's a polling place, you can't engage in campaigning or electioneering within 100 feet of where polling is occurring. Although people can put campaign signs and things like that on public property outside of that limitation during an election day. So how can we advocate for a referendum if we actually do feel this is something good for the city? We can do that off-duty when we're not on paid time. We can do that as a private citizen because everybody has their First Amendment rights. And sometimes what happens is that, and you see this a lot with park districts, they have foundations that are created, Friends of the Park, because if it's a political action committee or not-for-profit foundation, they have the ability to raise funds that they can then expend on advocacy if they want. If it's not-for-profit, they have to watch out that they don't cross that line into political advocacy, which would turn them into a political action committee. But that's how a lot of times public bodies do get referenda passed, by working through those kind of organizations. Now, we have been consulting municipalities about home rule for a long, long time. One of our clients, the Village of Lisle, was home rule, and they ultimately voted to not be home rule because they didn't like the home rule powers once they got it, so the electors took that away. But we have had several that have wanted to be home rule, and they've asked us, well, what are the elements of a successful home rule campaign? How come it works in some communities and how come it doesn't work in others? And what we found is that in communities where it's successful, there's usually three elements that are present. First of all, there's significant trust in governmental officials. Now, these days, there's not a lot of trust in governmental officials on a statewide basis. But on a local level, you know, it really has to do with your elected officials and what they're trying to do, and whether or not they're communicating with the public, and whether or not they're accountable for their actions. So one element is that there is an amount of trust between the citizens and the governing body. The second is that there's a clear communication about what home rule powers will be used for if they're successful. And a lot of times, people will say, look, we want to have these, and for example, a long time ago in the city of Bloomingdale, they wanted a golf course, so they wanted to be home rule because they wanted to raise the funds for a golf course, and they could impose a tax on that if it came to town. So they were very clear about what they wanted to use their powers for. So instead of saying, well, we want to have home rule powers and we're just kind of dabble in them, I think what I would urge the city to do, that if you are going to embark upon this, is try to go through the laundry list of what I read and narrow it down to say, you know, if we had these powers, this is what we would use them for. And then we have to communicate that to the public to say this is what we're going to use them for. This is why we want to have them. We're trying to provide some property tax relief to our residents here, and we're trying to use our taxing powers, for example, in other areas that aren't going to have the burden borne solely by the residents of Zion, things like that. But there's a clear articulation of what it's used for. And then the third element of a successful home rule referenda is that there has to be a widespread informational campaign as to what it means and what it doesn't mean. Because as with anything, what happens is that, what do you read about in the news? The bad apples, right? So there have been some municipalities that had home rule powers and then used it for things that the residents never expected it would be used for, and you hear that public outcry. So there's a lot of fear many times when people hear about people wanting to have home rule powers. So, and it's a legitimate fear because people have heard about that fear. So that's the third element. Just have information about what it's going to be used for, and then, you know, have that accountability too. when it does come in place, that you only use it for what you said that you would use it for. So there you have it, kind of Home Rule 101, a general overview of it, but I'm willing to, answer any questions that any of you have about this.
Do the commissioners have any questions?
Yeah. Carrie Lynn, this is an open session. I understand that we really can't meet in closed session to talk about this. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm going to have to I'll be asking questions then, and if I'm close to crossing a line of things that shouldn't be said, you please stop me.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing that attracts me about home rule is that there are 177 legislators in Springfield, only 2 of which represent our community, and actually only partially because they have broader districts. So all the powers that you just listed here, the taxing powers and all those things, Springfield already has. And these are in the hands of legislators that may or may not know us and may or may not have other communities that are asking them to do things. And I think one of the real advantages of home rule is that the people out here have elected us to represent them. We're the people that you see in the grocery store. We're the people that you see at church. We're the people that you see in the park listening to concerts, things like that. So we rub shoulders every day. We're in communication with each other. And yes, you are giving some broad powers to elected officials in this city, but they're people that you know, people that live in your community and that are also affected by the statutes and the ordinances that we make. We feel it too. Is that something that can be said publicly in a brochure or something? You didn't stop me, so I just kept going.
Well, you're not really advocating for home rule. You're just pointing out that one of the benefits is that it's the exercise of local control.
Yeah.
So if, to the extent that that's a factual statement, that is information you could disseminate. I mean, if the city did decide it wanted to embark upon an informational campaign, we would normally review whatever you're planning to send out ahead of time to make sure that it's not crossing the line into political advocacy. But yes, I mean, that would allow you to exercise powers here, and it would allow the residents to have local accountability. I think that's why there's a lot of frustration with state government, because it's so far away, and they can't accost someone in a grocery store as they will be able to do out here if things go wrong.
So what remedy do voters have? Let's say we put this on the ballot, it's approved, and the city council, maybe not this city council, but a future city council, starts adding this tax and that tax. What remedy do voters have to get rid of home rule?
They have the same thing that happened in the Village of Lisle. The voters have the ability to put it back on the ballot and take it back off.
What's the process for that? How do they do that?
I believe they could either come forward to the city and have the city put on a referendum to do it, or they could petition to do it. And I mean, I'm not up to date. I don't know what this, I haven't looked at it.
So they have to go to the county clerk's office, get a petition, and do they have to, in order to get a referendum on the ballot, you have to have a petition?
I really can't hear, because I'm getting words from coming up this way, talking here. So, please.
There's a procedure, I guess.
Yeah, they would file it with the city clerk, and then the city clerk would certify the referendum to the county, and the county would put it on the ballot for the next election.
All right. So there is a way
Yes.
for that to happen.
My immediate response is that there's a way to,
And vote us out of office, too.
get them out of office. Absolutely.
Because essentially, we are the most accountable to the citizens of the city. So,
I've heard a couple questions on some of the specifics of it. One of the questions that's been raised is, would home rule affect the City of Zion's ability to deal with an individual's Second Amendment rights? Does that give us any power to do that? I think that's a fear of some people that I think there were references to Deerfield and Highland Park. And I want to be sure that that's answered.
Yes, not right now. There's not, I mean, I've given kind of the list of that. There are cases, I believe, that are percolating up, challenging that. But, I mean, I don't believe right now that would be an appropriate exercise.
I think the state legislature preempted the ability of home rule communities to do that.
Yeah, and in many areas they have. I didn't prepare the list of everything that home rule municipalities cannot do.
There was also, we had talked, I think, when we were putting the resolution together about limiting our own power. Could we, the question came up is, can we put this question out there and say we would not raise property taxes any more than a normal, what we could do under the property tax cap? And is it true? I mean, the explanation that we got at that point was that, well, yeah, you can't put it on the question. The question is Zion going to be home rule? We could pass a resolution saying that we wouldn't do that, but the day after home rule was passed, we could flip that resolution and ignore it, or another city council could ignore it later on.
Well, that's true, but by the same token, you could adopt an ethics ordinance and then repeal it also. I mean, generally, people operate with a certain standard of ethics, especially if they have sought to be a public servant. So, yes, it's true, people can always abuse power, but, in this instance, I think if you wanted to hold yourself out with accountability and say, hey, this is why we're exploring home rule, and these are the parameters we're willing to live within and adopt that, you would be able to do that.
And then one of the other questions that came up, and I thought it was from something that you wrote, I think I read an article that you wrote, and I thought one of the last things in there says that we as elected officials cannot say, if this doesn't pass, these are going to be the horrible consequences of what's going to happen. Or we're going to have, fairy dust being going to be sprinkled on Zion and all is going to be well. We can't say things like that.
Well, you can't threaten retaliation. You can make factual statements about what would happen if you didn't have the ability to exercise home rule powers. And that's why, sometimes there's a fine line with respect to that.
You actually mentioned it,
Excuse me.
and if I'm crossing a line, please stop me. But one of the benefits of home rule is the ability to spread out the tax burden off of property taxes, because nobody wants their property taxes increased.
Thank you.
But if we have the ability to increase sales tax by 1%, or maybe it's 1.5. So what's the limit? There's a limit. I mean, we can't just increase sales tax 10%. We could increase sales tax by at least 1%. And that would give revenue that would save city jobs and provide city services that we would likely have to cut if we didn't have that revenue stream coming in. Is that something we can say?
As long as they're factual statements. I mean, that's why, I guess I would really...
That's a plan. That's a way of saving city jobs, a way of providing city services by having that revenue source in sales tax coming in, because we don't have any other tools available to us to create revenue to save those jobs and to provide those city services at this time. There's future development projects and things like that, but that's in the future. If we don't have that revenue coming in, it's likely we'll have to cut city services.
So here, maybe this will make it a little more clear for you, okay? So the prohibition isn't on what you say, it's on expending public funds to say it, okay? So, I think that might answer your question. So if you believe as an elected official that the city is going to have to make certain cuts if you do not have home rule powers, you are entitled to say that. What the city can't do is send out something that says, vote yes, or we are going to do that, which I think was what my article was talking about that you referenced. Right. So all of you have the ability to have your opinions one way or another with respect to that, and as long as we're not sending out city employees on paid time to deliver a certain message, that's fine. But if you want to walk around your community and make speeches and say things like that, you don't have to be afraid of saying that, because you still have your First Amendment rights to say whatever you want and to hold whatever opinions you want. So maybe maybe that clarifies it a little more.
That does, that helps a lot. Anything else from the commissioners on questions?
My question was, how would home rule impact crime-free housing? Or is that something that could be implemented within our community?
So there are special laws with respect to crime-free housing that, you know, I'm just not, I think you would have the ability to adopt a scheme with respect to that, but what I'm not sure of is the interaction of the county related to that. So I don't know that offhand. I would have to find that out and get back to you.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of things have to be investigated, but right now we have nuisance abatement. But that is 3 calls to 1 address in a 6-month period. There's actually so much wiggle room in getting out of that type of nuisance abatement that it's very unlikely that, well, how many times have we actually enforced nuisance abatement?
I couldn't say off the top of my head, but we've had a couple of instances where it was so serious that we brought in the Attorney General's office and took it to that level to make the changes, the landlord had to make the necessary changes to bring those properties in compliance with what we expect.
So it's my understanding that would expedite that whole process. If we had an address in town that continually had criminal activity in the structure, we could address that immediately instead of going through the nuisance abatement.
Yes,
plan.
it gives you greater regulations on subdivision controls and zoning controls and code enforcement, for sure.
And I know we also have property that has a significant amount of liens on it. And I just asked Director Ianson earlier, you know, how much money do we have outstanding in liens that have yet to be
Over the
collected?
years, it's well over $1 million.
Okay, so it's a lot of money that's sitting out there. And it's my understanding that home rule would allow the city to collect those liens first instead of banks and mortgage companies and, you know, other entities. But the city would be the first to collect on liens on property. That's my understanding.
Is the city already foreclosing on liens that it has?
Say that again?
Are you already, for the liens that you have, is the city already foreclosing on the liens? Okay, well, that's something we can explore with you, you know, to go forward with that, but you're saying in the event that the property's foreclosed on?
Yeah.
Moving up on the priority chain? Yeah, but we can probably help you with
So
some
these
other
are
options.
non-property tax ways of the city to get money that's due the city and allow us the ability to actually lower our levy.
Yeah, that's exactly why a lot of municipalities want home rule powers.
If we reached the point in negotiating with fire and police on their salaries and so forth, we're doing everything that we can to keep the employees, but our budget says, no, we can't do what we'd like to do because we're bound by what the union has to say. Is there anything that we, with home rule, could do to bypass the union?
No.
I knew that was a loaded question.
Are there any other questions?
I would just say that for the most part, the presentation covers most of the ins and outs of home rule. I've been reading quite a bit about it over the past few years, actually. And I know that this was something that when you were running, that you wanted us to explore. I think that it would be, the positives for the city would be very good. I think we can get a lot done. We just have to bring the facts to the voters and let them decide.
And Mr. Nabel, do you have the list of that Carrie put together on all the taxes and the things that you just read off here?
Yeah.
Could you make copies of, you know, get 30 or 40 copies of that, or somebody get 30 or 40 copies so that the people out here can have it and they can, because that's a very extensive list and I don't think anybody really caught all that stuff, but they'll have the information. And so the commissioners have any more questions? Okay, then we're going to open it up for questions just questions. Again, we're not going to get into a debate, but I've got a couple comments that I want to make as an introduction to how we got here. Because when I ran for office, there was absolutely no thought in my mind that we would be going to home rule and that we would be in the position that we are today, that is requiring us to at least consider this and asking the citizens to consider it. A couple of them were, I look at this as primarily three things that I would like to get addressed in home rule. And the first one is housing. And I have to ask I would ask anybody here in a private conversation, are you happy with our housing stock in Zion and the direction that it's going? And I'm guessing everybody's going to say no. We have, I'm going to ask Director Ironson sometime before this, or maybe when this part of the meeting is over, is to get, if we still have that map on how many rental units we have in town, and put that up just so that people can look. It's startling, and if we could put it in the lobby, on how many rental units we have. Do we still have that map?
I don't believe we do, sir.
Oh, okay. But I think one of the things that I want to do is use the home rule powers, if we can, to give us more flexibility on housing. The other one is crime. We just put out the police department just put out something on Facebook that talked about the unprecedented amount of gunshots that have been happening in Zion. We're not happy with it. You're not happy with it. We understand that, and I think that the crime-free housing can be addressed, but it can also, when I'm going to get to my third issue here, if we can raise more revenue, I think then we can do more for our police force and get more officers out. Getting officers out isn't going to, we can have an officer on every, we can't put an officer on every corner. That will never happen, but we can get more, and that would be one of my priorities. And the revenue part, I think we talked about this through our budget hearings. We are, just so you understand, we started fiscal year 2017 and 18 with a $400,000 deficit. We are 4 months, 5 months, how far are we into this fiscal year? We're into a 5-month period on fiscal year 18 and 19, and we have a $750,000 deficit for this year that we have to cover. So we actually have approximately a $1.1 million deficit that we have to address. The thing that I favor on the home rule for revenue is increasing the sales tax by 1 or 1.5%. And a 1% increase in the sales tax would bring in approximately $2.2 million for the city. That would cover our deficit this year, and it would also, I think we have to think long term. I don't want to just cover it for this year and then expenses are going to keep going and we're not going to have other revenue sources. If we could, if we do a sales tax, and that's what I would be in favor of. I would not be in favor of property taxes. I would not be in favor of, there's a lot of taxes listed on that list that are, you know, they're not relevant to us. They're relevant to a larger city like Naperville. When you're talking about transfer taxes and things like that, we don't sell that many homes that we're going to get a real estate transfer tax. But sales tax, it's not just going to be us. It's going to be everybody that comes into the hospital and stays here. It's going to be people that come in from out of town. It's going to be people that shop at Walmart. It's going to spread it. It's not just going to be on the backs of the Zion citizens. So that's my position on that's the only tax that I would be in favor of raising. And I know people are cynical. Carrie Lynn said there's not a lot of trust in government. I have promised that the information that we give out as a council will be factual. We're going to be open, and we're going to tell you the truth. We're going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly facts about where we are. And then it's going to be up to the citizens of our community to decide how we're going to solve it. We're trying to go forward. What I want to explain is how we got here. Because when I got elected, I said, I never thought I'd be doing this. And I'm just going to start. I'm going to go through a list of things that have happened in the last, most of them are in the last 10 years. But obviously, the nuke plant closing down in 2008, and the housing crisis, or excuse me, the nuke plant closing down and the housing crisis in 2008 affected property values, which affected the dollars that come in on taxes for all the governments in the city. For Zion, for the city itself, the last 12 years, the police and fire pensions have risen from $1.2 million a year to $2.9 million annually. That's what we pay in police and fire pensions. I don't want to beat up on them. That comes out of Springfield. We have no control over that whatsoever. Our tax levy for property taxes is $7 million. $2.9 million of that is going to police and fire pensions. From 2009 to 2011, $8 million of city funds have been expended towards the development, legal costs, and contractual obligations for the Fielders project.
Yeah.
We don't need the theatrics. We wouldn't be in a financial hole right now that we are if we had that $8 million. We wouldn't be having to do any of this if that $8 million were there. In 2012, because of the Fielders project and the $8 million of city money, the city was not able to cover operating costs at that time. So a $2.5 million bond issue was floated to cover general operating expenses. And you got to understand that what happens now is that if this is like if you got a mortgage and you got a car payment and you've got all these payments that you have to make. You got to buy your food and your insurance and everything, and you get to the point where you can't cover that, so you go out and get a $20,000 loan to cover your expenses. Well, you cover your expenses for a little while, but when the $20,000 is gone and you haven't increased your revenue, you still have all those original costs, and now you have the interest that you're going to have to pay on that $20,000. So that's kicking the can down the road. And the annual debt service on this $2.5 million bond issue for operating expenses is $455,000 a year until 2022. So I said we have a $700,000 deficit. $455,000 of it is going to a bond issue that was passed in 2012 to cover operating expenses. The Fielders agreement, which was signed by the city, obligated the city to pay taxes on the property, and the taxes on the property are $250,000 annually for a period of 25 years, and the city would not own the property at the end of that period of time. The city would not own the property, and the obligation, if you went $225,000 for 25 years, that's $6.2 million in taxes that the city would have had to pay on that property and not own it. So we purchased the property for $3.7 million to get out from underneath the tax obligation and at least own the property now. We are paying $300,000 a year to pay off the bond that we took out to buy the Fielders property. So if you add up the $455,000 of the $2.5 million bond issue, the $300,000 that we're paying on the purchase of the Fielders, that's $755,000, which is our deficit this year. So that would still leave us $8 million that we would have if we weren't paying these. And the agreement to pay the taxes was signed over the objections of our city attorneys. There was a 2012 audit showed that the city did not pay into the police and fire pensions for 1 year to the tune of $1.8 million. So to make that up, the city paid $500,000 per year back to the pension funds between 2012 and 2015. And that, the extra earnings on that for a, it's the interest that, it's the earnings that they would have had if we had given them the $1.8 million, they invested, they would have had the earnings, we had to pay for the earnings too. So there are all these things that are sitting there, and now we're sitting on a $750,000 deficit for this year plus the $400,000 for last year, and the consequences of this, Director Neighbor, what's the percentage of our budget right now, that our general operating budget that is personnel and benefits related? Do you remember that?
About 80% for salary benefits.
Yeah. We can't cut any more gas. We can't, we have to buy police cars. Now, we get criticized because we bought some police cars, but they can't be out walking in the winter. So we're doing what we have to do, but we have no more operating expenses to cut. So we are trying to go with this. We're presenting this to the citizens, and it's up to you. And whatever you say, whatever the citizens of our community say, the chips will fall. Chips are going. They're flying, and they'll. How does that go? Chips will fall and they may. That's it. That's what I was trying to get out.
Because, Mayor, we're not likely to take out issue another bond.
No, we're not going to issue another bond to cover operating expenses. That's kicking the can down the road again. It's going to get us farther into debt and more trouble. And again, if we would have the opportunity to raise the sales tax, I would certainly recommend that we go higher than what we need right now to cover the deficit, so that we're covered for a few years coming on. Now, we got a couple of, there's one other thing I want to say. Everybody says you got to bring in more business. You know, get a Panera Bread, get a Chipotle, whatever. But we have some disadvantages here, and every single day, we're trying and we're talking to somebody to bring in a business. We have some disadvantages here, because when a business decides, when they're trying to make a decision on where they're going to look, this is where it is. They draw a circle around it, and they do the demographics to see how much money is there, and whether they can survive, and whether the demographics aren't just how much money. It can be cultural. It can be a lot of different things you're taking in there. Our problem is we lose half our circle. The fish don't buy food. The fish don't buy cars. You know, we got a lake over here, and there's nobody living there. So when these places are looking at us, we've had Panera. We've talked to Panera. They're like, yeah, this ain't going to work. We've talked to Starbucks. You guys don't meet our demographic. So we're trying to get that. Now, the thing I want to, and all I'm going to talk about is the city taxes here. I'm not going to talk about the school taxes or anything like that, but the expansion of the hospital, it was an $85 million project. $35 million of it was real property. So the other $50 million was personal property. It's beds, it's MRIs, it's all the things that go into their personal property. $35 million was real property. The city, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we receive about $250,000 a year out of that project. Now, when people want us to bring in a Panera, or you want us to open a Dairy Queen again, I mean, we're still trying to do that, but that's spitting in the wind. If we're getting $250,000 a year out of a $35 million project, we have serious problems. My goal has been to try and hit a couple home runs, where the city can really get some money. And one of them is the medical marijuana cultivation center. That is it's still a possibility. It's in court. It should be settled in September. But again, that has not come through. The other one is the spent fuel rods, and that is pushing a heavy, heavy stone up a very steep hill. We've made some traction in Washington, D.C. There's a bill in the Appropriations Committee. Nothing's going to happen before the election in November, but we're still pushing it. If those things come through, we'll be great. I would love to give people money back. I'm not going to be here, but I would love to give money back to people. But that's what we're facing here, and that's why this is coming up. We don't have many choices, and if I'm going to cross the line here. If this does not pass and we don't have that ability, there will be cuts in services. I would say like I've never seen here before. It will impact the entire community, and we don't want to do that. And if anybody has got any suggestions on what we can do with our budgets, you've talked about phones. We would be happy for you to come in and help us look at our phones. We've had 2 audits by companies that are looking at our phones, and we've done it twice, but we'll take any suggestions that somebody can have. I'm not going to the point where somebody suggested that all city workers are part-time. We're not going to do that. But anyway, okay, now, do you guys have any questions? And all I ask is that you raise your hand, let me call on you, and again, we're not going to get in a debate. This is not I'm against home rule, I'm for home rule. It's just, do you have a question that we can possibly answer? Yes, sir.
So, my question is...
Who are you asking? Are you asking our expert?
Everyone that's up here on the panel. So, how much do we give for the police and firefighters?
The average, and again, 2.9, well, it's $2.9 million.
2.9. Now, are all our firemen and policemen from Zion?
No, they're not.
I think that's a problem. You know what I'm just saying? I think that if someone works here, because you have to think.
Right, okay, that's a question. The answer is no, they're not. And I get that that's what you want to do, but you can do that during the next session.
Oh.
This is just answer questions on home rule.
Is there ever a time when a home rule becomes automatic, or can we always say yes or no?
I believe if our population goes over 25,000 people, it's automatic.
And then you can't vote it back out after that?
You can still vote it out after that.
Margie? Yep.
I just wanted to know if you could make the information that you provided about the deficit available to everybody.
It'll be on the city's city council meeting, and it should be on tomorrow, Chris. It usually goes on the day after the city council meeting. You go to the city's website, you go to city council meetings, and then you go to agendas and minutes, and there's a video for this date, and you can watch the entire circus.
Have any of you done research on business being taken to neighboring communities when the sales tax is raised in home rule?
No, I haven't done that yet.
But the average, for example, a hotel room, one we have here in Zion, would add about $1 to a room night. So that's a 1% increase. It's not a significant increase, and I have read some research that when people want to purchase something in their local jewel, for example, they don't first think, well, I wonder what the sales tax is here as compared with over there, and decide on making a purchase that way. So what the research has demonstrated is it's not a major decision-making factor of whether you buy in this store or that store.
And I think to add to that point, the sales tax in Zion right now is 7%. The city gets 1%. The state takes the other 6%, and then they send 1% back to us. If we raised it 1%, it would be 8. I believe Waukegan's 8. Do you know what Gurnee is?
I think it might be 8.25.
8.25. So we're not going to be out of line with anybody around here, and we only get 1% of the 7%.
And I should also point out, I think, David, how much did they cut the LDGF? They gave us a haircut on the LDGF from the state, correct?
Well, it's proportionate based on when they increased the tax rates in the state, we were getting our same, instead of 10%, it's now like 8.25%. So they didn't basically share the wealth on that.
Yeah, basically the state took a quote user fee.
Right. They're
out
constantly
of the
looking
local
at
government
that
distribution
to fill
fund.
their budget, so it's always a risk that they put out there, or threat that they put out there saying, well, we don't have to give this out, we can just keep it.
Right. So we didn't get back as much as we thought we were.
Mr. McLemore?
One question was, you said something about fears. Can you give us a little bit about the fears that you said happened in other places that had home rule?
Well, the fears were that, first of all, the local governmental officials weren't going to be accountable for using the powers that they had in a way that the residents wanted them to. So, for example, if they would say, hey, we're not going to impose all these different taxes, we just want to impose this sales tax or whatever, and then the next thing you know, there was a wheel tax and amusement, all these other ones. So it's a fear that people are going to abuse their power, which is prevalent in many local governments.
And that was my other question. The change in this here, page 2, change the number of trustees in terms of office by ordinance. Can you expound on that a little bit?
So, well, I mean, some of the home rule powers that can, home rule was put in the Constitution originally to allow the residents to try to exercise more powers. And when Illinois set up governmental structures, there were 6 structures that, like 6 flavors of government that you can have. One is a council alderman, one is a commission form of government, one is a village trustee form of government. So what they're saying is that if you want to be able to say, hey, instead of having 5 trustees here or 5 members of the council, we want to have 10, they could do that.
Okay. So my question to you, Mr. Mayor, so just say if it got passed, so what, the commissioners are now going to be aldermen? And what happens with the Cheyenne Township, because most of the commissioners are on their board too?
I would anticipate that it would stay the same.
Yeah, so just...
We don't have to change anything.
So they would be, okay, so
This would be just...
our commissioners would still be on the school board, school board,
Township.
Township board?
Right. We would stay a commission form of government. We would not become an automatic, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and the township is also still coterminous, so really, that wouldn't be impacted by home rule powers.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. The young lady said, you said that this home rule question is going to be on the voting referendum for us.
Yes.
She also stated that the best way to do it is to tell the voters what you plan on doing, raising the taxes. Is that going to be also be under? How's word of mouth going to get out to the voters that this is what the city council plans on doing, raising taxes, our sales taxes by 1.5%?
Yeah, we will get that out. We will say this is our intent, and we will put that factual information out. It's going to be, I mean, I understand that the fear is that people's taxes are going to be raised. I understand that. I think people are primarily concerned that their property taxes are going to get raised, but they are concerned about all taxes. And I know that people are concerned about the sales tax also, but it's the one that we think can be spread. We can get help from other people. It's not all going to be on Zion people. It's going to be people that are shopping at Walmart. And what do they? Well, never mind. I can't remember what else. We would get. How much do we get in sales tax from Walmart? We're supposed to be okay.
We get between $400,000 and $500,000 here.
We get between $400,000 and $500,000 a year in sales tax from Walmart. So a lot of that's from people from out of town.
May I have one more question, please? I'm a little ignorant to this question. What is the Fielder's property, and what do we plan on doing with it since you purchased it?
Well, we wanted to purchase it so that we didn't end up paying tax. Okay, what we would like to do is sell it. We want to get a developer in there, sell it to the developer, develop the property, collect taxes on that, collect sales tax on it. We don't, I've read things about having festival parks and all that stuff out there, but we're bringing in more baseball. And we have been approached by other baseball teams, and I tell them that, if you guys want to use that, if you guys want that property, go ahead and build a stadium on it. And then you can rent it for us to cover our $300,000 a year that we have to pay off on our bond. And if a high school, somebody says, well, why don't you let the high school play out there? We would let the high school play out there, but if somebody comes along and wants to buy it in the middle of their season, we're selling it. We want to get rid of it. We don't want that. We're doing something with Kmart tonight. Well, hopefully, all the properties that are sitting out there, we're working every day to bring somebody in, and we don't want to own them. And there was somebody said that there was something on Facebook. I look at Facebook way too much. But there was something on there that said that the city owns 400 parcels of property, and why don't we sell them? It's like, we don't own 400 parcels of property. And we would certainly sell them. And what was the other one? The other one was, why doesn't the city sell a hospital to streets? We tried to sell the city hospital, tried to sell a hospital to streets around the hospital a year and a half ago. or 2 years ago, when they did their layoffs, they said, no, we're not interested in that, guys. We thought they'd want to take them and have a campus out there. That's where we were when we first started this. You know, we're going to sell streets. It's pretty crazy. Yes, ma'am.
So, Commissioner, you brought up a huge point about the liens. Because there was a property in Zion that I actually was interested in that I wanted to buy, but these taxes are through the roof, so I don't even know. But we just keep collecting on it, but there's no, you're never gonna get the money for that. The lady, I researched her, I looked for her. She's like in the wind, the old nursing home in Zion.
27th Street.
On 27th Street. And I guess she was gonna do a vet center or something. She was partnered with someone. I found him. He said she's in the wind somewhere. But we're steady collecting on that property, and we can't get rid of it. So that is also affecting the debt like that.
Right, we are, and that's what we hope, that some of this will help us be able to move on some of those things.
But when do we say, okay, this property's been sitting, it's boarded up, people keep busting windows, it's not pretty outside, like nothing about it is.
All right, wait. We gotta take this to comments.
Yeah. Well, no,
Citizen comments. This isn't part of the question on home rule.
It is, because we're talking about the liens, and we're talking about, because I didn't sign up, okay.
If I understand it correctly, it would expedite the process that we would have to go through to acquire the property so we could tear it down. Right now, there's litigation after litigation for the city to acquire property like that. Trying to find the owner is a big deal.
It is.
Which we continue to do.
And keep in mind that if we get the property and if we have to buy it, and then we got to tear it down. If we take the property, then we got to tear it down, and that's expensive stuff.
Yeah.
Mr. Monk.
Question to the attorney: does the Dillon rule limit the authority of the municipality?
It limits authority of a non-home rule municipality, yes. So Dillon's rule is you can only exercise powers that it says you can exercise. So if you are non-home rule, you have to be able to point to a law that says you can do something. Home rule is the inverse of that. You can do something unless it says you can't.
Mr. Bremner.
First, excuse me, thank you, young lady, for your presentation.
Yes.
I have two questions. You mentioned that there could be no campaigning as such by a governmental unit. Should the city put out information about home rule and saying these are the good things, A, B, C, D, whatever it is, would the city also be required to, on that same presentation, say these are the negative parts of home rule, A, B, C, or E, F, G, H?
Good question. So the city can't advocate for or against home rule. It can only give out information. So if some of the information is a negative consequence, but it's factual, they can still give that out. They just can't say vote yes or vote no.
I understand that, but can they ignore the negative consequences while emphasizing the positive consequences?
They can do that as long as they're not expending public funds to do that.
All right. My second question, how does home rule affect the other 18, 19 taxing, how many, 19 taxing bodies? How does it affect the other 19 taxing bodies on our real estate taxes?
It does not impact them because it would only apply to the city. So they still have, I mean, the school district is still going to impose its tax, and the park district and the library district, that's not impacted by this.
Right, but they're not granted any extra taxing authority.
No,
It's
it would
just the city.
only go to the city.
Thank you.
Margie?
Does it affect, like the TIF districts or properties, is that affected by the home rule in any kind of way?
I think so.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
TIF.
No, TIF districts wouldn't be impacted by that.
No impact on
Do you think that raising the sales tax would be a deterrent for bringing businesses in, or is it? I mean, that would make sense to me that if it's going to fit us, they would look at that and say, yeah, but I'm not gonna consider you because you raised your sales tax and it's now this much.
Yeah, I wouldn't, my opinion, I wouldn't think so because our surrounding communities are higher. They're higher than, they're as high as we would go to or higher. Yeah, but it might. I can't, I don't know. I'm not a businessman. I guess you'd have to ask Mr. Whitmore behind you. Would that affect you, Roger?
I don't think so. It'd be minimal, to say the least. If it's 1% more, and I think 1% would get us out of the woods. But while I'm up, I might ask a question to the council. Mayor, yeah, I hope you're still going to be here someday, Mr. Mayor. But are we willing to do the hard part? You know, we raise these funds. We get the tax increase 1.5%. We get the $2.2 million. Are you still prepared to do the hard part and lean out some of the fat in the city?
Say that again. Get rid of
Well, I don't. You'll have to share with me. And I don't want to do it right now. But you'll have to share with me what you mean by the fat in the city.
Well, I just think there's areas that we can save money. If you're in business, you don't have the money. If I didn't have the money, I'd have to eliminate some things in my business.
Right, and that's what we're doing. We have eliminated. I'll share this with you. It's not that we haven't been doing that. This goes in 2008, and much of it is people. In 2008, that they're our most expensive. That's the biggest expense in the city is our personnel. Public Affairs had 3 people in 2008. They have 3 in 2018. Finance had 7 in 2008. They have 4 in 2018. Building Department had 10 in 2008, 7 in 2018. Economic Development had 3 in 2008, 1 in 2018. Fire had 27 in 2008. They have 28 in 2018. The police had 66 in 2008. They have 52 today. We're down 14 policemen. Public Works had 27. They're down to 23. So we've gone from 143 employees to 120 employees in 10 years. So we've been cutting back. Now, I mean, you are welcome to, and truly welcome to come and look at our budgets. We don't have any more operating expenses that we can cut. We could stop, buying coffee. I guess we could do that, and that'll save us a couple $100 a year. But it's beyond that. But yes, we would, Mr. Whitmore. I guess it's my philosophy that I think we try and do that every day.
Thank you.
Wait a minute, there's. Donna.
Okay, my question is, should the community vote to put home rule in place? Can the community, if not happy with it, is there a process or a way of rolling it back?
She talked about that earlier. There are 2 ways. There can be a referendum initiated to replace home rule, or you can get rid of. You can get new commissioners. You vote these people out. You vote them out of office. And this is, you can't vote people out of office any easier than you can the local official. It's a whole lot easier to get Mr. Madigan, or a whole lot more difficult to get Mr. Madigan out of office than it is to get Mr. Hill out of office. So, you always have that power. And I think that if the city council would abuse the intention that we will be stating on what we want to use home rule power for, if we abuse it, you hold us responsible. You hold our feet to the fire.
So how is that initiated?
They were talking about that. You have to go to the clerk, and I'm assuming you'd have to get petitions, put it on the ballot. But it's easier just to vote us out of office. We're not debating yet.
I'm not.
Okay.
How many years are the commissioners on?
4.
Okay.
4 years.
How many years is the mayor?
4. Oh, this mayor's got about 5 more months. 6 months.
Just in general, how long
4.
are your terms?
Everybody's 4-year terms.
Okay. So 4 years.
But they're alternating
two
terms.
years. Alternating every 2 years.
They're alternating every 2 years. There's 3 up, 1.
Yeah.
And
You have basically you have a chance to change half the city council every 2 years.
2 years. Yes, absolutely.
I
I just want to make a statement. If any dealings I've had with you, Mr. Mayor, and the commissioners, I fully in my heart believe that you guys have what is the best interest of the city in mind with what you're doing. That being said, my concern is that you already said you're not going to be here anymore. So after you're gone, you could open up another whole can of worms unless you change your mind to something.
Well, I guess I would say that behooves you as citizens and you as an electorate to pick people, to evaluate them, and pick people that you trust. And I know a lot of people think that a lot of this is popularity contest, and perhaps it is kind of. But when I was standing up in this parking lot every day during early voting, and one of the candidates running against me said, yeah, this is just popularity contest. Because he would go up and say something to people, and they would say, well, I'm voting for Al. And he'd say something, oh, it's just a popularity contest. And again, maybe it is, but it's popularity contest because I've been in this community for 32 years. I coached their kids. I coached them in hockey. I coached them in softball. They got to know me. I worked at the Park District for years. They knew that I was going to be straightforward, and if I may make stupid decisions sometimes, but you're going to know that what they are. And I think that the council that we have right now is everybody's working for the best interest of the city. I don't wake up in the morning. These people don't wake up in the morning thinking, how can we go and mess up the people of Zion? How can we screw this up? We do make mistakes, and sometimes we screw things up. But we're here working for the benefit of everybody in this community. We're not getting anything out of this. I mean, except beating up around the head and chest every now and then. But Mary Lou, I say it's up to you. You have to be concerned about, that applies to every other board in this community, the school boards, the Park District, every other one. It's up to you. When there was an article in the Tribune and they were talking about taxes, and when you're pointing your finger at somebody about taxes, you need to take that finger and point it back at yourself, because you elected the people that are raising your taxes. And it's up to you. So anyway, are there any more questions? We're not. We still got public comments to go. Clyde.
I just was home rule back then. First of all, I want to say what you just said made a whole lot of sense. You know, I mean, would you edit that out and get him singing that? And I'm going to put it up somewhere, man. You made a whole lot of sense. But my thing of it is, I like home rule, but I like for our commissioners to be part of the community. That's why I like automatic. They break it off into precincts, and they run from their precinct that they live in. They're more compatible in the community. Everybody, all y'all, besides Mr. McKinney, don't live, y'all live in the same neighborhood. You don't even want to live over in our neighborhood. You know what I'm saying?
That's not true.
I'm just saying in general. I'm looking for the.
Right, I understand. I understand what you're saying, but that's not part of our discussion just yet. But I would tell you this too. I worked in a community up in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, that had 13 aldermen. The city was about 14,000 people. It had 13 aldermanic districts, and you couldn't get anything done because it was all trading. It was horse trading, because if I wanted something if I wanted you to spend $20,000 in my ward, well then $20,000 better go to his ward, and $20,000 better go to that ward. It's the same thing that's in Chicago. If you have dedicated people who are interested in the entire community, and they're all looking out for it doesn't make any difference if something, if it goes to in Billy's neighborhood or Lloyd's neighborhood or Chris's neighborhood and Mike and I's neighborhood. we're looking we're trying to prioritize what's best and for the entire city. And when you start fighting over all our wards, it was ugly. And I think it gets ugly in Chicago, and I think there's a lot of waste when you start governing that way instead of for the whole city. But anyway, are there any more questions? All right, I'm going to, for those of you that do not want to stay for the rest of the city council meeting, I'm going to give you, we're going to take a 1-minute break so you can leave. And Rich, did you find that map?
No.
So I'll call the meeting back to order in about 1 minute.
Very good job. My folks originally came from Kansas City to Indiana when I was about 13. Went to high school there. In Zion since 1995.
Yeah, put it in.
So I've been here, my wife and I have been here.
Put it in. I think we'll be done, but go ahead and put it in.
Obviously, he did not know what you used to do.
Yeah.
Because,
Things we're looking up while we had this discussion going on. Things we're looking up over there on the department side.
Okay, now.
To be responsible. And some people,
Yeah.
Jason left.
close to high school. It's right across the school. We go here.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Item number 6 on the agenda is citizens' comments. First is Mr. Jason Ellis. And when you're speaking, would you please come forward to the podium and state your village or city of residence?
Good evening, Jason from Zion. Lifelong resident of the city. My grandfather worked for the city his entire life. Contrary to what a lot of you see on Facebook, I actually do care about the city. I know many of you personally, including the mayor and several other commissioners. This is not a personal attack against any of you. I'm friends with a lot of you. I know serving this community that you guys do want the good of the community. However, most of the citizens are fed up, and we've had it. We've been taxed out of our homes. People are flocking north. Commissioner McDowell, you said that you don't think the sales tax would affect anything. I'm already going to Pleasant Prairie because sales tax is 5.5% and not 7%. I think you're going to drive more and more people up there. It's not Gurnee. We're not Gurnee. We're close to the edge. It's an easy drive to go to Pleasant Prairie, to go to Kenosha. People in Gurnee stay in Gurnee. As the highest rated taxes in the entire Midwest, not just Lake County, not just Illinois, the entire Midwest, this little city of Zion is trying to go home rule. And we've already heard that you want to impose a tax. Again, maybe not you, maybe the people after you. I see tons and tons of taxes on here. I see more government regulation. This does not bode well for our city. You keep saying $1 million deficit. I say $1 million over budgeted. You say, where do we cut? Well, you made a budget that you knew that you couldn't fulfill. You knew there was going to be a deficit, but you made the budget anyway. There are places to cut. Everybody points to the city budget. The city budget is vague. We do not see a line-for-line item on where these dollars are going. We see a general idea of where they're going. We don't see where they're going. Basic economics tell us that you live on what you make. I'd love to live in a mansion. I'd love to have a Harley. I'd love to have a brand new car. I can't afford it, so I don't own them. This is what you do in economics. You don't have a deficit. You don't run a deficit. You don't do loans that you cannot repay. There's obviously not time to go out over all of it, but I'd sure like to see a line-for-line item on that. Finally, since the power plant closed, it's been a pointing game of something other than the commissioners, the mayor, and the people in charge's fault. It's always someone else's fault. It's the plant's fault. It's ComEd's fault. It's the state's fault. It's the federal government's fault. The Fielders debacle. Not one time did I hear a councilman, a mayor, anybody say it was their fault. And I realize most of you weren't there during all of that. I understand that. But we get tired of hearing it's always someone else's fault. I would just say the buck has to stop somewhere. I pray it stops with this council, or you're going to end up with a bankrupt city and people flocking north more than you see it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Marquise Barnes.
How you all doing?
Great.
I just had a couple concerns with the taxes. I just moved into my home not even a year, and my taxes have already gone up almost $1,000. Just trying to get some understanding. Would it continue to go? Is there some things we can contest? Because I know you all talked about renting property, but my taxes don't go down. I'd be one of the ones that would be renting as well as a lot of people in the neighborhood, because I just don't understand what are we paying all the taxes for. I really don't see anything. I know we right behind the school, but it's just not adding up. And I understand know with the school, but it's like we need help somewhere. It's just not me. We have an entire neighborhood that do a lot of things together, and this is a big topic. And a lot of people leaving our neighborhood, homes going up for sale, and this is definitely an issue.
You know, the assessor's office has put together this chart that says where your taxes go, and they've got this available, and I'd be happy to give it to you, that just kind of explains where our taxes go.
And Mr. Ellis just said that we do this a lot, but the city is about 14% or 13% of your tax bill. So
13.5%.
13.5% of your tax bill. So, like, I paid $5,800. So my city taxes are about $700 out of the $5,000. Is $700 or $800 out of the $5,800. And for the $800 that I paid, I'm getting how many police officers now? 47 police officers. You're getting police protection. I'm getting fire protection. I'm getting snow removed. We're not getting a whole lot of streets taken care of, but we understand that. But for the amount of money that the city's collecting, you get some services. And again, when people say my taxes, I'm saying you got to elect people that are to bodies that are gonna protect you in your taxes, and we're trying. We have had zero increase on taxes on 3 of the, well, we've only gone.
We haven't increased by the maximum in 3 out of the past 5 years.
Right. So we're trying to hold the line, and again, I'm trying to get some of these things that would bring in revenue to, if the fuel rods happen, that money will go to the schools, it'll go to the library, it'll go to the park district, it'll go to the city. But whether that'll happen or not, I don't know. And I'm paying tax. Anyway, I hear you loud and clear, and we're doing the best that we can.
Is there any way possible? I mean, I'm pretty sure it has been. I mean, it has been done. But like our officers, our firefighters, even our teachers, how can we get them to be in the community, because they're getting the money from here, but yet they're going to their neighborhoods and taking care of their neighborhoods, but it's almost like you're taking from this neighborhood, giving to there, and yet we're stuck with a lot. What could we, anything we could pass?
Yeah, we could. That's something that we could do. It's a tough nut, though. I think we have, how many city employees? 144 total? 144. Wait, I had that here. 144, and I just looked at the other 19 of them live in the city.
That's a problem. That's No, I get it.
No, I understand that. But if you want to do that, it has to be something, you can't say, okay, we're going to give everybody a year to move into the city.
Right.
You could do that, but you're going to lose. And I don't have I do not have a problem with particularly firemen and building code enforcement people living outside the city. It's hard to live a block away from the guy that you threw in jail last week, and it's hard for, and a lot of our building inspectors are in town. It's hard for them to run into somebody in Jewel who's mad at him because they gave him a violation. So there's other issues.
Now, when it comes to I would love for my police officer to live in my neighborhood, because that police officer would know my kid, would know the community, because you can police it better. And nothing against police, fire, or anything, no matter. But when you're coming in, you really don't, I feel people are trained a certain way and taught a certain way. So I always say this, when you look into a kid's eye and you don't see my kid, the respect in the different levels just isn't there. But that's just what I wanted to.
Thank you.
I would add one thing. Because didn't Assessor Wickett say that
House values are going up?
But he said appeals, you can still appeal your assessment. I think is the deadline this week?
Yeah, I was coming up tomorrow. I was coming up there tomorrow.
Right, so yeah, make sure if you have an issue, make sure you get your appeal in and contact the assessor's office. They'll actually help you work through it.
Appreciate that. Thank you all.
Thank you. Cynthia Corey.
Hi, I'm Cynthia, and I've lived in Zion since 1983, and I don't see the improvements being made that the previous city council and mayors have said. I know my taxes started out at $1,600. They're up over $5,000 on my tiny little shack. And the deficit that the city of Zion has is not from the residents. It's from mismanagement of the council and the mayor. We have to live on very strict budgets to raise our families. And I don't see that the city of Zion should be punishing the residents by raising our taxes, by raising the sales taxes. That's where I just don't think that it's fair to expect the citizens of Zion to pay for the mistakes of the council and the mayor. Okay?
Thank you. Denise Lear.
Hi, I'm Denise Lear, and I'm a resident of Zion, been a resident of Zion for over 53 years. And my question is, I was at the last city council meeting where there were a lot of residents, citizens complaining about flooding. Since that, I made it a point to drive the streets of Zion to check the sewers. I'm retired, so I can do this. Not a sewer has been cleaned in that period. I see the city workers because, fortunately, I live behind Cheryl's. The only time I see them is between 11 and 1 o'clock having lunch. Never seen anybody clean every sewer that I've been through, and I've been all the way down to Elizabeth, none clean. Only the newly paved streets. And that causes a lot of flooding. My daughter lives in 2300 block of Joanna. Her sewers have been blocked since the time that I was here the last city council meeting. There's trees growing in the sewers. There's trees growing out of the sewer systems. It looks terrible. So that was my only issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McLemore?
On a good note, how y'all doing this evening?
I came to invite, we have a community store, Salem Foods, right here on Galilee and Salem. And they decided that they've been in the community and the community been supporting them and they want to support the community. So on August 25th, this Saturday, between 4 and 7, they're going to block off the parkway, and they're putting up bouncing for the kids, and they called old Clyde, and Clyde got involved and got the schools involved and started getting some backpacks, and we got a haircut, and got a guy bringing shoes. So all this is going on Saturday at Salem. I want to invite, I did contact the police, and I'm sorry, somebody took it upon their hand and made a flyer and put the police and the fire department and everybody on there, and they didn't have nothing to do with it. The man at the store don't want, he's not charging nothing for this. He just want to give back to the community at Salem. I did talk to Deputy Chief. He said he would. We asked that one part of the street be cut off for the safety of the kids, and they said they would do that. Chief, I wasn't able to contact you. I meant to come over your office today, but I'm without a car right now, to see if we could get a fire truck over there, if anything, between 4 and 7. A lot of people know that me and the mayor, we've been friends for a long time. But I am the founder of the Lake County chapter of Black Lives Matter, and I've been attending this racial synopsis. Reverend Carson gone at his church on you know that we've been doing, right? And it's really been good. But one of the questions asked, why Black Lives Matter? So what we're going to do is on Saturday, September the 1st, between 1 and 3. It's going to be at the Zion Library, and we're inviting everybody to come. And the name of this forum is going to be Why Black Lives Matter. It's going to be questions and answers. What we plan, what we do. There's people here at Black Lives Matter, and they say, "Oh, they coming down there to protest and everything." It's not always that. We've done some good things here in Zion. I think we have. I hope we have. We try to build this community together. And another thing, last time I was here, I talked about the alleys over there. Ray, thank you. Thank you, man. The alleys, y'all did something over there. Thank you, and that's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, you still my friend.
Item number 7 on the agenda is the consent agenda. Would the clerk please read the consent agenda?
Approval of minutes of a regular meeting held on August 7th, 2018 at 7 p.m. Approval, but not release, of closed session minutes of a meeting held on August 7th, 2018 at 8:35 p.m. Bills, vouchers 129923 through 130021 drawn on Huntington National Bank, total $468,240.25.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
You have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Is there discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 8 is consider passing the ordinances as follows. 8A is authorizing second amendment to water supply contract with Lake County Public Water District per Administrator Nabel.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. You have an amendment to the contract with the Lake County Public Water District before you. What you're really looking at is the last 3 pages. The first part of that is the first amendment, which was passed prior with the prior ordinance. What they've done in the past is in the contract, they charge us a repair and maintenance amount annually, and they spread that out over 9 months as part of our bill. It becomes just kind of awkward and cumbersome for both them and us when you have 9 months of billing or credit that's given to us versus a 12-month period because your bill spikes up and down during those last 3 months. Just for bookkeeping ease for both sides, they're proposing that we change that 9 months, spreading it out over 9 months to 12 months. I recommend approval.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There's a motion?
Second.
And a second. Is there discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Commissioner Hill?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Item 8B, establishing regulation of the institution installation of certain facilities in the right-of-way per Administrator Nabel.
Thank you again, Mayor, Commissioners. The state has recognized that right-of-ways for wireless companies, utilities, things of that nature have become a much more sought-after commodity as we continue going down the road of telecom and things like that. So the state basically adopted an ordinance that allows the local municipalities to set forth determinations of what it can be used for, what it can look like, how repairs are made, who's responsible for those, all the things of that nature. So they're basically giving us rights in their act to maintain that on a local level. We just have to adopt the ordinance that's presented that basically says we have those rights for our right-of-ways.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this Small Wireless Facility Development Act.
A motion? Second?
Second.
And a second. For discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner Brady?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 8C is approving and authorizing execution of an economic incentive agreement with Little Caesars Enterprises, Inc., 2340 Sheridan Road, LLC, Sheridan Road Route 173, RPA, Little Caesars, 2340 Sheridan Road, per Administrator Nabel.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. This is for the construction of the Little Caesars restaurant, which is going to be going at the old, if all goes well tonight, going to be going at the old Taco Bell building. You have some pictures of what the proposed construction would look like. This is a corporate lease. They would be leasing the facility, not owning it. So what you have before you, and you actually have a slight amendment to what was in your packet, but
Excuse me, Dave, who would be leasing it and not owning it?
Little Caesars would be leasing it from the owner. The corporate store, Little Caesars, would be leasing the property from the owner, but they're going to be the ones doing all the construction work and doing for level funds.
Little Caesars is, or the?
Correct, Little
Okay.
Caesars is.
Right.
So what you'll see is, this is the standard language for our TIF agreements, with a slight difference of typically the grant only goes to the owner because we're improving their property. However, because Little Caesars is putting all the money into the project, we are basically doing a dual party reimbursement so that Little Caesars is getting the benefit of the reimbursement, not the owner, because they're the ones putting all the money in the property. So there's a slight change there. What we also have in here is the kind of the standard language that we have in our TIF agreements, but most of our TIF agreements have come from mature TIFs that have already had some funds in place, have some funds accumulated, and what we've typically done in the past is we front the money, and then we basically have a clawback period where part of that gets forgiven over time to ensure we get return on our investment, basically. What Little Caesars is doing is putting all that money up front, they're funding it, so we're not out of pocket anything up front. And then we'll be reimbursing them from the increment that comes through as time goes on.
So let me just be sure I understand this. What we typically would do if, let's say, a coffee shop, and they wanted to expand with the drive-through, we would give them $75,000 in TIF money. Then we would require a clawback that says if they would sell the building or quit business in a year, they owe us 90% of what we...
$67,500 or whatever.
Right, they owe us 90% of what we gave them. If it's halfway through the clawback, they owe us 50% of what we've given them. In this case, they're putting all the money in.
They're putting all the money up front, correct.
So what we are going to do then is as they pay taxes, we will, into the TIF, we'll use that money to reimburse them for what we would have ordinarily might have given them up front.
Correct.
Okay.
So they're basically, for lack of a better term, financing our TIF incentive with their money.
Okay.
So it's much different than a typical grant because they have all the skin in the game up front, basically. So, like I said, what I wanted to present was the standard language, and I wanted to hit two items on here that I would propose based on discussions, based on the facts that we just discussed, that we amend from the standard language. So the first one is on page 4, section 5, item A2. and this is on the revised one that you should have received. It says the sole source of reimbursement will be from available incremental property taxes attributable solely to the project on the property and not from the Sheridan Road Route 173 TIF as a whole. Again, that's been something that we've put in there in the past saying, in a mature TIF, saying you will have, whatever increment you generate will be what's used to reimburse. Now, like I said, they're putting the money up front and we don't have other development. They're kind of the first project in this new TIF that's going to spur other projects. So what I'd like to do in here is change that to say the greater of the increment that's generated from that property or 50% of the TIF revenue that comes in. This is similar to when we had the Anna's Marketplace agreement. They had to spend a lot of money up front. They were going into that area. They were the first developers going in there. And as we said, there's costs associated with it. We're willing to invest more up front with you as a development. And since then, there's been Dunkin' Donuts, the strip mall's full, a lot more traffic out there. So we're taking the same approach here so that they can get their return on investment that they're fronting sooner than just their increment if things accelerate. But we're not saying everything of the TIF goes to them because I want to make sure we have funds available in that TIF district. Should their neighbor or someone else in the district say, we want to develop, I don't want to commit all of that to Little Caesars because that's not fair to that development. So my proposal would be the greater of the increment generated specifically on this project or the annual revenue until that $150,000 is reached.
And where does it say that in here?
It doesn't. Right now it just says the project.
Okay.
Solely from the project.
Okay.
So I'll propose an amendment to that as part of the motion. The second change is on page 5. The second paragraph, item 4. The TIF incentive will be forgiven in quarterly installment of $3,750. Basically the clawback over a period of 10 years. I would recommend that we reduce that to 5. Again, they're fronting this. We've looked at this in the past to say we want to get at least 10 years out of the business, but that's based on our investment up front versus them putting this all up front.
Does that mean the amounts then are going to change to 30,000?
The amounts will change to reflect that.
Okay.
To basically double the amount every year. We have Mr. Carwin here to represent Little Caesars, but to his point, if he was proposing putting $800,000 into a property that's only going to last 5 years, he'd be out of a job. So this is a corporate lease. It's much different than a little mom and pop type shop as far as the risk. Likely it's not going to happen, but corporate would like to see that to get the deal. I don't think that's a major issue, a major risk to us. So I would propose a reduction to 5 years on that as well. Other than that, it's our standard language on the lease agreements.
I'm interested to see who's going to make the what he said motion.
I'll make it.
So David, could you just, I'm sorry, but could you direct us on what the motion should read, especially on the first part? I get the second part, but the first part, I don't know.
I
what type of
would
word.
recommend that the motion be approve the agreement as presented with the addition of a greater than 50% of annual revenue provision to reimbursement and a reduction of the clawback from 10 years to 5 years.
No, but before you said whichever is greater.
Whichever is greater. The TIF, the increment from the project or 50% of the annual revenue in the TIF.
Okay.
What he said.
As long as the clerk got that, yeah.
No, I do not.
Okay. Right. Would you say that again? She does not have. And we'll get that motion made.
I have it right here.
Do you have it, Chris?
Okay.
So greater than 50%. I got that part.
Right. Okay. Why don't we just say this? We'll make a motion to approve the agreement with the amendments as recommended by the city administrator. For replacing solely on page 4, part 2, with the greater percent of
50% of the
50% of the
revenue.
TIF revenue.
Or the increment from their project.
Or the increment from their project, and amending on page 5, section 4, amending the period for the clawback from 10 years to 5 years.
And does the amount change in that
And
provision?
with the amounts adjusted accordingly.
Spread out over 5 years instead of 10. But it's the same 150,000.
You get that?
Does that work?
Okay. Okay, we have a motion.
I think Mr. McKinney, you wanted the second on that, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 8D is amending Section 3416 ambulance charges of the Zion Municipal Code per Chief Lewis.
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. At the last council meeting, I brought forth a change Section 3416, which would include a non-emergency special service fee. After some discussion, Council went ahead and approved that change. So what you have before you is the ordinance which reflects the change and it just needs approval.
I'll make the motion that we approve the changes to ambulance charges.
For non-emergency service calls.
Yep.
And we have a second, we have a motion and a second? Yes, we have Commissioner Deteen. Is there discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 9 is discussion, authorization, and approval. 9A is consider zoning docket 18Z5 requesting a special use permit to operate an indoor climate-controlled self-storage facility located at 3355 Sheridan Road as petitioned by JSM Venture, Inc. for Director Ironson. Planning and Zoning Commission recommends approval with conditions.
Thank you, Your Honor. JMS Venture, Inc. is seeking a special use permit to operate an indoor climate-controlled self-storage facility located at 3355 Sheridan Road. It'll be approximately 650 rental units ranging from size 5x5 to 10x30, totaling 68,500 net rentable space of lockers, along with ADA compliant leasing counter, along with moving supplies. At the Planning and Zoning Commission, they voted to approve 6-1 with conditions that is contingent upon approval of plat of subdivision, which is on the next docket for September zoning.
Did I miss it in here, Director? Is there a description of what the interior is going to be?
There was a layout. I don't think it was a description. I thought there was a layout in there showing how the lockers were laid out.
This is the Kmart building for people that are interested.
The petitioner is here, and he could probably answer that question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what are the storage areas going to be like?
Good evening, my name's John Mengel. As Rich, I think, pointed out, there are approximately 690 units of various configurations, from the smallest unit being a 5x5 to the larger unit being a 10x20, even 10x30. They're largely interior climate-controlled facilities with multiple access points, interior loading. There's a leasing office that's occupied by obviously a manager during normal business hours. It has access control, has DVR-related security with cameras and such, as is typical these days. This would be considered kind of a next-generation product relative to what's in the community now. The product that's available on 173, it represents a different generation, if you will. And so this is air-conditioned, heated interior, secure, out of the weather, next generation product.
What is the makeup of the structure that I'm putting this stuff in?
Sorry. The locker systems, as they're called, are manufactured primarily by one major manufacturer called Janus Industries. And it's a corrugated steel product with a baked enamel finish on it. You have galvanized partitions between them. You have rolling overhead doors. The top of the units are secured by a wire mesh to allow water for the sprinklers to access the units, but also to prevent people from entering the units if they're not so authorized. They have cylinder locks inside the rolling lockers. The partitions are
not an erector set, but you start with a flat surface, and you configure them in the unit mix that you think is going to be is going to meet the needs of the community. One of the things that people maybe sometimes forget is that self-storage, like an apartment building or anything else, you have to have a variety of products. People have different needs. They want them for a different period of time. So you have a variety of units, and you hope you bring the right unit mix to the community.
And you operate these facilities in other locations?
Yes, but I'm a developer, I'm an owner, and I have national companies. In this case, I'm anticipating that Extra Space Storage would manage it. It's like the hotel business. They fly the flag, they do the branding, they do the hiring, the training, the collections, the merchandising, the marketing, and so you get kind of best of breed. Extra Space, I think, has over 2,000 properties, and they run it like a military operation. So.
How many do you have?
I have 2.
Yours in Chicago?
Yeah, one's downtown and one's in Northfield.
Any other questions?
What kind of revenue return do you get on a project like this? Just a ballpark annually.
The rents, your going rents versus your stabilized rents are different. So when you open, your rents are lower than at the end. And you probably get to, if you're lucky, you get to 90% occupancy. So you probably have $800,000 of revenue maybe.
And Chief, David, what would the revenue potential be for the city for a project like this?
I checked with the assessor and I was trying to get a number back from him. I got a ballpark estimate that we'd be looking at about $200,000 to $300,000 property tax increment over current vacant rates, basically, on that property.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, did you have a question?
Yeah, I saw that there's customer access is limited. I think that's important since there's a senior housing development right behind there.
Yeah.
How do you limit that?
Well, obviously, access can only, you have to have a lease. You have to be a customer. Then there's a keypad, and that keypad verifies that you're current on your rent. And you're limited to presently 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. are kind of standard business hours for an existing customer.
Chief, forgive me, but I don't understand your question. What's the connection between the senior living and the...
I think that would disturb the residents if you got people coming in there at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, no.
I see.
No.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
So move to approve for requesting special use permit.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 9B, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Consider zoning docket 18Z6 requesting a variance to section 10261B of the Zion Municipal Code to change the north elevation and lot line as the front yard with the east and west lot lines corresponding as the side yards and the south of lot lines as the rear yard for better access for property located at 3355 Sheridan Road as petitioned by JSM Venture LLC per Director Ianson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just to explain that in a nutshell, they want to move the front yard to the north side of the building for better access. So the setback in the front will be a minimum of 20 feet, 5 feet on each side, and 5 feet in the rear. And the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 6-1 to approve with the condition of approval of the plat of subdivision.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the variance.
We have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Is there discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 9C is consider approval of text amendment to the Zion Municipal Code, Section 10-9C, to exempt not-for-profit community organizations regarding waiving city building permit fees per Director Ianson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Recently, Commissioner McKinney, McDowell, and I met with a non-for-profit community organization regarding waiving city building permit fees. The reason is they operate on grants and donations, and these funds do not cover permit fees. Since implementing the permit fees on these organizations, their assistance to our community residents have dropped approximately 80%. Staff is recommending we amend section 10(9)X and 10(9)Y to exempt these organizations from customary permit fees.
Is there a motion?
So move to amend sections 10-9X and 10-9Y to exempt these organizations from customary permit fees.
Second.
The motion and a second. Is there discussion?
I had some questions for Director Ianson. Yeah, I believe he answered them all for me, at least to my satisfaction for this. The only thing I didn't understand is why, if there was still a provision within the text that extenuating circumstances, they could request a full waiver. Because currently it requires, we're asking for 50% of current fees. And it seems that that provision to get that waiver hasn't been exercised. And so that was a concern of mine, is that there was a provision there and it's not being used. So if that's the case, then, you know.
I'm befuddled by this whole thing because it was just October 6th of 2015 when we passed an ordinance on the Municipal Code Text Amendment on building permit fees because we decided that we didn't want to have to make a decision on everybody that wants to have a building permit fee waived. And I'm looking at the minutes from that meeting, and with okay, I gotta be. BJ Gas in Bethesda Village at 2400 29th Street came in and asked that to have their $22,000 worth of building fees waived. And we made a policy at that time and said any churches and nonprofit organizations within the city would get a 50% waiver. So now by doing this, we're going right back to where we were, and everybody that wants a building permit fee waived, they're going to come here and we're going to have to decide, well, that one is good enough to get one and that one's not. And I mean, do we owe BJ Gas in Bethesda Village $11,251 for their half the building fee that we charged them 2 years ago?
I don't know. This does not change what nonprofits would have to pay for their building permits. I'll just give you an example. We've got a building project. We need to get at Christ Community Church. We need to get building permits, and we'll get that reduction of 50%. This is for service organizations that are charities that come into the city and help our residents with some of their building projects. So like Rebuilding Together, I think would be an example. They're a group that comes in, helps our residents. They raise money within the city, out of the city, and then they do projects for our residents that can't afford it. They meet certain criteria that charity allows, and then the projects are completed. So it's those organizations that we're asking to waive the fees for, not churches, not other nonprofits that would normally get that 50%. These are for service organizations that come in and help the residents that need help.
That can't afford the park.
Can't afford it, yeah. Mm-hmm. They meet the criteria of the charity.
So youth conservation, when they do a building, will they be, we waive building fees? This is discussion. We're not opening it up to the floor.
Energy
assistance. Yep, we're not opening it up to the floor.
Right. Okay.
Youth conservation?
Yeah, they would apply. They would apply.
They would get it.
According to this.
Maybe we should establish a policy that says that then.
Yep.
Well, they're a group that comes in and, I mean, we saw
our policy right now, it doesn't differentiate between them. If we want to do that, then let's establish a policy that says that. But our policy says, second by Commissioner, in an ordinance, the municipal code section increasing the fee for renewal permits.
The proposed amendment would exempt the not-for-profit community revitalization organizations.
Yeah.
It would take them out of the 50% category and put them in the fully exempt category. That's the proposed text amendment.
And how are those organizations, how do we identify them? Are they identified by their tax status, or are we just taking it on their word that they are?
I don't know what documentation, what the city requirements are for that. I'm just looking at the proposed text amendment. That takes what was previously noted as service organizations, which was in the 50% category, and right there, and strikes that. And now what is listed as not-for-profit community revitalization organizations, and includes that in governmental and taxing bodies which are fully exempt from permits. Now, how the city determines what is a not-for-profit community revitalization organization, I would have to defer to staff.
Which will then defer to us. So, anyway. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
No.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
No. Item 9D is consider request to consider waiving the manager's fidelity bond raffle application per Clerk Spooner.
Thank you, Mayor. Assistance in Healthcare has submitted a raffle application requesting authorization to conduct a raffle for fundraising purposes. The club has submitted a letter requesting that the manager's bond be waived and has indicated on the application that a unanimous vote of the organization's members approved the waiver request as required in the municipal code. I respectfully request that the council consider Assistance in Healthcare's request for a waiver of the bond requirement.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion? Second?
Second.
Second. Discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Item 10 is departmental commentary. Department heads have any comments they'd like to make? Item 11 is announcements. September 1st at 6:30 p.m. is the Zion Queens pageant. September 2nd at 8:15 p.m. is the Jubilee Days fireworks. September 3rd, 8 a.m. is the mayor's prayer breakfast. That's mayors plural rather than mayors possessive. On the 3rd, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Jubilee Days Arts and Crafts Festival. Excuse me. At 1 o'clock, the Jubilee Days Parade. September 4th at 7 p.m., the Zion City Council meeting. Item number 12 is we are in need of a closed session pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2 open meetings for the discussion of personnel and collective bargaining. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Motion to go into closed session.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Discussion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Deteen?
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinney?
Aye.
Mayor Hill?
Aye. Thank you for your patience and your stick-to-itiveness.
I'll get something there. Other than that, I'll call.
David? We have a